In ancient China, there is a very strange book. It doesn't begin by telling you how to live. It doesn't start with a list of rules or a neat philosophical argument. Instead, it begins with something that feels almost like a myth. In the Northern Sea, there is a fish called kun. This fish is so enormous that Zhuangzi says no one knows how many thousands of miles long it is. Then, one day, this giant fish transforms into a bird called Peng, and Peng is just as vast. Its back stretches for thousands of miles. When it spreads its wings, they look like clouds hanging across the sky. It rises on a great wind and flies 90,000 miles into the air, heading toward the distant southern sea. That is the very first image of the Zhuangzi, a giant fish becoming a giant bird, rising from the ocean into the sky. And the person who gave us this image was Zhuangzi, one of the most imaginative and perhaps one of the freest thinkers in ancient China. At this point, you might wonder, why would a philosophy book begin with such an extreme, almost impossible story? Why does a fish need to become a bird? This is not just a strange myth. What Zhuangzi is really pointing to is transformation. Some lives are not meant to stay forever in the same waters, and maybe that is why this story still matters today. Modern people have more choices than ever. We can choose where to live, what to do, who to be with, what kind of life we want to build. But somehow, more choice has not always made us more free. We still compare ourselves to others. We still feel the need to prove ourselves. We still wonder if we are good enough, successful enough, useful enough. And this is exactly the kind of unfreedom Zhuangzi cared about. More than 2,000 years ago, he was not trying to teach people how to win the competition. He was not trying to make people more productive or more efficient. He was asking a different question. If the whole world keeps telling you that you must be successful, useful, correct, and worthy of recognition, can you refuse to let those demands become your life? That is why we are reading the Zhuangzi today. It is not a book about how to become successful. It is a book about how not to be trapped by success. It is not telling you to escape from the world. It is asking how you can live in the world without losing yourself. And it does not begin by saying, this is how life must be. Instead, it keeps asking, who said life has to be this way? Next, we'll begin with this giant fish and this giant bird and enter the world of the Zhuangzi, a world full of imagination, but also full of deep questions. Zhuangzi will use a tree that nobody wants to show us why we don't always have to prove our usefulness. He will use a butterfly to question whether the self we think is so fixed is really fixed at all. He will use a cook's knife to show us how to act without exhausting ourselves. And he will use a living being that is destroyed by well-meaning friends to show why too much control can damage life itself. These stories may seem strange at first, but the questions behind them are very familiar. Who am I? Why am I so tired? Whose standards am I living by? By the end, you may find that the Zhuangzi is not some distant, difficult ancient text. It is asking questions that modern people still face every day. How can I stop being defined by other people's judgment? How can I avoid turning myself into a tool? How can I live in a complicated world with less inner conflict? How can I face change, aging, loss, and death? And finally, what does real freedom actually mean? The Zhuangzi is not like many works of philosophy that begin by defining concepts, building arguments, and leading you step by step toward a conclusion. It is more like a strange forest. You think bigger always means better? You think usefulness is the same as value? You think death can only mean grief? You think helping someone become better is always a good thing? This is what makes the Zhuangzi so unusual. It does not simply hand you standard answers. Instead, it turns your questions back toward you. And as you keep reading, you begin to realize that many things you once took for granted can be seen from a completely different angle. The standard version of the Zhuangzi contains 33 chapters. Traditionally, these chapters are divided into three parts: the inner chapters, the outer chapters, and the miscellaneous chapters. The seven inner chapters are usually seen as the heart of the book. The outer and miscellaneous chapters take these ideas further into questions of politics, society, knowledge, education, reputation, death, and the relationship between human beings and nature. If we had to summarize the whole book in one sentence, we might say this: the Zhuangzi is concerned with one central question: how can a person live without being trapped? Not trapped by identity, not trapped by other people's judgment, not trapped by beauty, ugliness, success, or failure, not trapped by life and death. So now, let's begin with the first of the inner chapters: free and easy wandering. The first chapter of the Zhuangzi is called Free and Easy Wandering. And if we had to choose one image to open the whole book, it would be the story we began with: the giant fish Kun transforming into the giant bird Peng. It is a fantastical opening, but Zhuangzi is not simply trying to write a myth. What he is really showing us is this: life can transform, our vision can expand, and freedom requires a larger space. A small puddle cannot hold a great fish. A weak wind cannot carry the wings of a giant bird. Zhuangzi says that if the water is not deep enough, it cannot carry a great boat. And if the wind is not strong enough, it cannot lift the wings of Peng. This matters for us today. Many people want freedom, but they have not truly prepared for freedom. We want to change our lives, but we have not built the capacity for that change. We want to escape other people's judgment, but we still check their opinions every day. We want to live as ourselves, but we are still afraid of not being accepted. We want to rise like Peng, but the wind inside us is not yet strong enough. So for Zhuangzi, freedom is not an impulse. It is not recklessness. It is not tearing everything down just because we are unhappy today. Freedom for Zhuangzi is a kind of expansion, an expansion of vision, an expansion of how we understand the world, an expansion of what we believe is possible for ourselves, and an expansion of our ability to accept different ways of living. In free and easy wandering, there are also small birds who laugh at Peng. They say, in effect, I fly up to a branch and that is enough. Sometimes I do not even make it that high and simply fall back to the ground. Why would anyone need to fly 90,000 miles? This is an important moment. Zhuangzi is not simply saying that Peng is noble and the small birds are inferior. He is showing us that different lives have different scales. If a small bird uses its own scale to judge Peng, of course Peng will seem ridiculous. But if Peng uses its scale to judge the small bird, that would be just as absurd. We do the same thing in modern life. Some people want to reach the top of their careers. Some people simply want a quiet life. Some want to travel the world. Some only want to take care of a garden. Some need adventure. Some need stability. Some find meaning by changing the world. Others find meaning by caring for the people right in front of them. Zhuangzi asks us to be careful. Do not use one scale of life to judge every life. In free and easy wandering, there is another important story: the story of a huge tree that nobody wanted. In the original text, the tree is called Chu, but we do not have to worry too much about exactly what kind of tree it was. What matters is this: in the eyes of a carpenter, it was useless as timber. Zhuangzi's friend Hoezi once said, I have a huge tree, Its trunk is twisted, and its branches are crooked. When carpenters see it, they do not even stop to look at it, because it cannot be made into furniture, beams, or tools. It is so big, and yet it is completely useless. After hearing this, Zhuangzi did not say, "Yes, you are right, it is useless." Instead, he asked, "Why do you have to look at it from the carpenter's point of view? Why not plant it in a vast open field? People could rest under its shade. They could wander around it freely. And precisely because it cannot be cut down and turned into lumber, it will not be harmed by axes. It can live out its life in peace." This is one of Zhuangzi's most important ideas, the usefulness of the useless. At first, this sounds contradictory. If something is useless, how can it be useful? But what Zhuangzi is really saying is this: some forms of value cannot be measured by whether something can be immediately used. We live in an age that is obsessed with usefulness. Reading has to be useful. Hobbies have to be useful. Exercise has to be useful. Even rest has to be useful. Many people cannot even relax properly because they keep asking themselves, is this helping me grow? Is this making me more competitive? Zhuangzi is not saying that people do not need to work, nor is he saying that ability does not matter. He is simply reminding us, do not turn yourself completely into a tool. A tool's value depends on how others use it. But a human being should not be considered valuable only because they can be used. Some things may seem useless, yet they allow us to feel life again. Things like silence, daydreaming, or taking a walk with no destination. At the end of free and easy wandering, Zhuangzi presents an even higher state of freedom. The perfected person has no self. The spiritual person has no achievement. The sage has no name. This sentence is difficult to understand, but we can put it this way. A truly free person is no longer controlled by a narrow sense of self, by the need for visible achievements, or by other people's judgments and labels. No self does not mean having no identity. It means no longer clinging so tightly to the self that constantly needs to be proven, praised, and recognized. No achievement does not mean doing nothing. It means not turning every action into a performance or a demand for reward. No name does not mean having no value. It means not building the foundation of your existence on other people's labels. So, from its very first chapter, Zhuangzi tells us this: true freedom is not about escaping to some other place. It is about learning to see ourselves from a much larger world. If free and easy wandering opens up the sky of life, then the next chapter, the equality of things, opens our eyes. The equality of things is one of the most important chapters in Zhuangzi, and also one of the easiest to misunderstand. Equality of things does not mean that everything is exactly the same, nor does it mean that there is no difference between right and wrong, beauty and ugliness, life and death. It is more like a reminder. Many judgments we think are absolute are actually judgments formed from a particular point of view. In this chapter, Zhuangzi tells a famous dialogue. Nikkei asks Wang Ni, is there a common standard of right and wrong in the world? Wang Ni does not answer directly. Instead, he asks, when people sleep in a damp place, their backs ache. But does the same thing happen to an eel? When people climb up a tree, they feel afraid. But does a monkey feel the same? People may think certain women are beautiful, but when fish see humans, they dive into the water. Birds fly away. Deer run off. This passage is not saying that there are no judgments at all. It is saying your standard is not necessarily the standard for all living beings. Today, we live in an age full of judgments. The internet allows everyone to express an opinion instantly, but it also makes it easier for everyone to fall into opposing camps. We often feel that our way of life is the normal one, our political views are the clear headed ones, our taste is more refined, and our life choices are more mature. Zhuangzi would probably say, slow down for a moment. What you see is only one angle, it is not the whole world. There is another very interesting story in the equality of things. It is called 3 in the morning and 4 in the evening. A man who kept monkeys was giving them acorns. He said, I will give you 3 in the morning and 4 in the evening. The monkeys became angry, so he changed the wording. All right, then I will give you 4 in the morning and 3 in the evening. The monkeys immediately became happy. In fact, the total number had not changed. It was still 7. What changed was only the order and the way it was described. Zhuangzi tells this story not to laugh at the monkeys, but to remind us. We often do the same thing. When the same event is called failure, we feel pain. When it is called a fresh start, we begin to see hope. The facts have not completely changed, but the way we look at the facts has changed. When a person is labeled falling behind, we feel anxious. But when the same person is described as moving at their own pace, we feel relieved. Zhuangzi wants to remind us the same thing described in a different way can change how we feel about it. Very often, what hurts us is not the fact itself, but the label we attach to it. At this point, Zhuangzi has already pushed the question one step further. It turns out that we are not only influenced by what the outside world says, we are also influenced by what we say to ourselves. We often say, this is just who I am. I have failed. I am just not the kind of person who can change. But are these judgments about me really so reliable? Next, Zhuangzi uses a dream to tell the most famous story in the equality of things, Zhuangzhou dreaming of a butterfly. Before we talk about this story, there is one small detail worth explaining. Zhuangzi's own name was Zhuangzhou. The Z in Zhuangzi is an ancient honorific title for a thinker, a bit like saying Master Zhuang. So when we mention Zhuangzhou, we are talking about Zhuangzi himself. One day, Zhuangzhou had a dream. In the dream, he became a butterfly. The butterfly flew back and forth among the flowers, light and free. It did not need to prove who it was, nor did it need to explain why it existed. It knew nothing of Zhuangzhou. It knew nothing of identity, responsibility, reputation, or worry. It simply followed the wind, landed on a flower, and then rose from the flower again. In the dream, it was completely a butterfly. But after waking up, Zhuangzhou found himself back in reality. He had become the person called Zhuangzhou again, and it was at that very moment that the question appeared. Was it Zhuangzhou who had just dreamed he was a butterfly? Or is it now the butterfly dreaming that it has become Zhuangzhou? This story sounds like a beautiful and strange dream, but what it really asks is not which one is real, the dream or reality. Instead, it asks, this self that you think is so certain, is it really that fixed? We often lock ourselves inside identities. I am successful. I am a failure. I am someone who is loved. I am someone who has been abandoned. I am young. I am growing old. Zhuangzi says, perhaps all of these are only stages in the transformations of life. You do not have to be completely defined by any single fixed identity. This matters deeply to us today because we hold on to the idea of me far too tightly. The me on social media, the me in other people's eyes, the me from past failures, the me inside a particular relationship, any of these can become a cage. Zhuangzhou dreaming of the butterfly tells us, life is more fluid than labels. You can change. You can wake up. You can understand yourself again in a new way. So, The equality of things is not asking us to give up judgment, it is asking us to give up arrogance. It reminds us, I have my perspective, but my perspective is not the center of the universe. By this point, we have moved from the scale of life in free and easy wandering to the shift in perspective in the equality of things. Next, Zhuangzi will bring the question into more concrete everyday life. If life is limited, but the world is infinite, how should we act so that we do not exhaust ourselves? The third chapter of Zhuangzi is called the Master of Nourishing Life. Here, nourishing life does not mean taking supplements or following a modern wellness routine. It means caring for the root of life itself. At the very beginning of this chapter, Zhuangzi says, human life is limited, but knowledge, desire, and the outside world are infinite. To use a limited life to chase infinite things is dangerous. Placed in today's world, this sentence almost feels as if it were written for the information age. Every day, we can take in endless information, courses, and social updates. You can always learn more, earn more, watch more, compare more, and become more anxious. But human energy, attention, and life are all limited. So Zhuangzi says that nourishing life is not about endlessly chasing more. It is about knowing when to stop and when to move with the natural flow of things. The most famous story in the Master of Nourishing Life is Cook Ding carving an ox. Cook Ding was a chef. One day he demonstrated his skill in front of Lord Wen Hui. His movements were incredibly smooth. Every step forward and backward had a rhythm. His hands, shoulders, and feet all moved together naturally. It did not look like heavy labor. It looked almost like music. Lord Wen Hui was amazed and asked him, how can your skill be this extraordinary? Cook Ding replied, what I care about is no longer just technique. What I follow is the Tao. Here, Tao should not be understood as a mysterious religious slogan. For now, we can understand it as the natural pattern of things, or the way everything unfolds according to its own structure. Cook Ding said that when he first began learning this skill, all he saw was the huge and complicated body of the ox in front of him. After a few years, he slowly began to see its inner structure. Later on, he no longer relied only on his eyes. Through long practice, he developed a deeper understanding and moved along the spaces that already existed between the joints and bones. So he was not relying on brute force. He was not forcing his way through. He was moving with the natural grain of the thing itself. Because of this, his knife had been used for 19 years, and yet it was still as sharp as if it were new. On the surface, this story is about the skill of a chef, but underneath, it is about how we act in life. Very often, the problem is not that we are not trying hard enough. The problem is that we are trying too hard. We rush to push a relationship forward. We rush to make our career produce immediate results. We rush to arrange life exactly the way we imagined it should be. But if we do not understand the structure of things themselves and simply keep pushing by force, the result is often that the thing does not work out, and we exhaust ourselves in the process. Zhuangzi is reminding us, the truly skillful person is not necessarily the one who uses the most force, but the one who best understands how to move with the situation. This is what Zhuangzi means by moving with ease, with room for the blade. In modern language, it is a little like what we call a flow state. A person is deeply focused, their movements feel natural, and things unfold according to their own rhythm. It is not about forcing yourself through, and it is not about brute strength. But Zhuangzi is saying something deeper than simply being in a good state. He is not mainly concerned with how impressive a person's performance looks. He cares about whether that person is constantly draining themselves while they act. A true master does not only get things done, a true master also preserves their own vitality. They know when to apply force and when to stop, when to move forward and when to go around, when to persist and when to follow the natural course of things. So, moving with ease, with room for the blade, is not just technical mastery. It is a more mature ability to live, to do things well in a complicated world, while creating less inner friction and keeping more calmness within yourself. The Master of Nourishing Life reminds us life is not a knife that can be worn down forever. True wisdom is not only knowing how to get things done, it is also knowing how to preserve yourself in the act of doing. But when we live in the world, we do not only face tasks and situations themselves, we also face relationships, power, misunderstanding, conflict, and people and environments that cannot be easily changed. So next, Zhuangzi turns its attention toward the more complicated human world. This is the chapter called In the Human World. In the Human World may sound like a chapter about the world of human affairs, but what it really deals with is a very practical question. When we live in a complicated society, how should we speak? How should we act? And how can we avoid being pulled into relationships and conflicts that end up hurting us? In the previous chapter, The Master of Nourishing Life, Zhuangzi talked about how a person can act without exhausting themselves. In the human world, he takes the question one step further. We do not only deal with tasks and situations, we also have to deal with people. People may misunderstand you, they may judge you, they may challenge you. Some people cannot be changed simply because you explain things reasonably to them. Some situations cannot be turned around just because you enter them with passion and good intentions. So, in the human world is not about escaping society. It is about learning how to protect your own mind before you step into a complicated world. One important idea in this chapter is called fasting of the mind. The phrase may sound very Eastern, but we can put it simply. Fasting of the mind means first allowing your mind to become quiet. Many things are not wrong to say. The question is, where are those words coming from? If you speak from anger, even the best argument can turn into a weapon. If you advise someone mainly to show that you are clearer or wiser than they are, your words will carry a hidden sense of superiority. The same is true in arguments. Once all you care about is winning, you are no longer really listening. And when it comes to changing other people, we have to be even more careful. Very often, we think we are trying to save someone, when in fact we are only pressing our own wishes onto them. There is a story in the Human World about Yan Hu, one of Confucius's students. Yan Hu wants to go and advise a ruler who is known for being violent and difficult to reach. Yan Hu believes he has morality and ideals on his side. He wants to change that country for the better, but Confucius warns him, if you go like this, it will be dangerous, because Yan Hui is already carrying a very strong intention in his heart. I want to correct him. I want to change him. I want to prove that I am right. And the more you approach someone in that state, the more likely they are to resist you. In the end, you may fail to change them, and you may also get yourself pulled into danger. Yan Hui is thinking, how do I enter a chaotic place? How do I persuade someone who does not listen? How do I make things work? But Confucius pulls the question back one step. Before you open your mouth, first look at your own heart. Fasting of the mind does not mean turning yourself into someone with no emotions, nor does it mean staying silent whenever something happens. It is more like setting down the things inside you that are too urgent, too crowded, too eager to prove themselves. Very often we think we are speaking reason when we are actually being pushed forward by anger. We think we are helping someone when we may simply want them to admit that we are right. This is not hard to understand today. On social media, the moment we see an opinion, we want to argue back. When someone says something wrong, we want to correct them immediately. As soon as someone stands on a different side from us, we quickly place them in the opposing camp. It looks as if everyone is talking, but much of the time, no one is really listening. Everyone walks into the public square carrying a sword. Before they even understand what is happening, they are already ready to strike. Zhuangzi is not telling us to be silent. He is not saying we should always step back or give in. What he is really pointing out is this: when we enter a complicated world, the hardest thing is often not what to say, but what kind of heart we are speaking from. If your mind is already unsettled, even reasonable words can create new conflict. The more desperate a person is to win, the less they can hear anyone else. The more eager they are to change others, the more easily their kindness becomes pressure. So, in the human world is not about escaping people, it is about learning how not to be swept away by them. Before speaking, look clearly at yourself. Before acting, look clearly at the situation in front of you. Not every thought needs to be expressed immediately. Not every argument is worth entering. Not every person can be changed by us. This is where Zhuangzi's clarity lies. He is not against action. He is against action driven by emotion and obsession. A truly mature person is not someone who always wins with words. It is someone who knows when to speak, when to stop, when to move forward, and when to pull themselves back from the noise. There is another story in this chapter about a great tree. There was a carpenter named Carpenter Shi. One day he was traveling to the state of Qi. As he passed through a certain place, he saw an enormous oak tree. The tree was so large that it could shade many oxen. A crowd had gathered around it, and everyone was amazed by its size. But Carpenter Shi did not even stop to look at it. He simply walked past. His apprentice found this strange, so he caught up with him and asked, "Master, we have been carpenters for so long, but we have never seen timber this large. Why didn't you even take a look?" Carpenter Shi said, "That tree may look impressive, but it is useless as material. If you make a boat out of it, the boat will sink. If you make utensils out of it, they will break quickly. If you make pillars out of it, they will be eaten by insects. It is precisely because it is not suitable for timber that it has not been cut down. That is why it has been able to grow this large." Later, the tree appeared to the carpenter in a dream. It seemed to say to him, "Why do you insist on judging me through the eyes of a carpenter? Fruit trees are harmed because their fruit is delicious. Once the fruit ripens, people pick it and their branches are broken. Cinnamon trees are cut down because they are useful. Lacquer trees are carved into because they are useful. Many things are wounded precisely because they are too useful, and because of that, they never get to live out their natural life." This story is similar to the story of the great tree in Free and Easy Wandering, but the emphasis is not exactly the same. In Free and Easy Wandering, the great tree tells us not to measure life only by practical usefulness, but in the human world, this oak tree seems to be reminding us of something else. In the complicated world of human affairs, being too eager to prove that you are useful can sometimes become a way of getting hurt. Modern society rewards expression, competition, visibility, and personal branding. We are constantly made to feel that we need to be seen, that we need to prove we are capable, valuable, and clear in our positions. Of course, to live among people, we cannot remain completely unseen, nor can we never express ourselves. The real problem is that we so easily turn being seen into an instinctive pursuit. If we have talent, we feel we must show it immediately. If we have an opinion, We feel we must say it right away. If we suffer even a small injustice, we feel we must instantly set the record straight. This is exactly where in the human world gives us its warning. Sometimes showing too much sharpness is not necessarily strength. Being too eager to prove yourself does not always make things better. If a person needs to win every time, be recognized every time, and make sure everyone knows they are right every time, the one who gets worn down in the end is often not someone else, but themselves. This is not about becoming slick or calculating, nor is it about teaching people to give in all the time. Zhuangzi's point is closer to this. A person has to understand timing and also learn how to preserve life. And by preserve life, he does not only mean protecting the body, he also means protecting your spirit, your clarity, and your vital energy, whether in the workplace, at school, in the family, or in public debate. The truly difficult question is not simply, do I dare to speak? The harder question is there any real point in saying this now? Is this argument worth entering? Is this person actually able to listen? If all we are doing is throwing ourselves into a mess in exchange for a brief feeling of victory, perhaps that is not really courage. So the maturity described in the human world is not about always rushing to the front. It is about knowing how to preserve yourself among people. You can step forward, but you can also step back. You can speak, but you can also stop. You can persist, but you can also move around what cannot be changed. This is not weakness, it is a clearer kind of strength. Because if a person cannot even protect their own mind, it is very hard for them to truly change anything. And from here, Zhuangzi pushes the question even deeper. If a person's appearance, body, or identity does not fit society's standards, are they still whole? Do they still have value? That is the question answered in the next chapter, The Sign of Virtue Complete. The sign of inner fullness is one of the most unusual chapters in the Zhuangzi. In this chapter, Zhuangzi writes about people who, in the eyes of society at the time, would have been seen as incomplete. Some have physical disabilities, some are considered ugly, some have no status, no wealth, and no obvious social advantage. In a more conventional story, people like this might be written as objects of pity, as failures, or as people waiting to be rescued. But Zhuangzi does something completely different. He does not write them in order to make us pity them. He writes them to make us ask a deeper question. Where does a person's wholeness really come from? One of these figures is named Wang Tai. Wang Tai has lost one foot. According to the usual standards of his time, he would not be seen as a perfect person. He also does not look like the kind of teacher people would naturally admire, and yet, strangely, many people are willing to follow him and learn from him. Someone finds this hard to understand and asks Confucius. This man does not stand up and give grand speeches. He does not debate with people. Why are so many people drawn to him? The answer is because he is inwardly settled. He does not attract people through appearance. He does not pressure people through status. He does not persuade people through clever words. There is a steady power in him. When people come close to him, they feel calm. They feel accepted. They feel a kind of ease, as if for a moment they do not have to prove themselves. Through Wang Tai, Zhuangzi is showing us that some forms of influence do not come from external conditions. They come from inner wholeness. There is another, even more unusual figure in this chapter, Ai Teitu. Zhuangzi says that A Teitu is extremely ugly. By ordinary social standards, he seems to have no advantage at all. He has no attractive appearance, no impressive status, no wealth to show off. And yet, strangely, many people who spend time with him want to be near him. Men are willing to be his friends. Women are willing to stay close to him. Later, even Duke A of Lu meets him and is drawn to his presence, feeling that this is someone who could be trusted with great responsibility. It sounds almost impossible. How can someone with no obvious external advantage have such a powerful attraction? Zhuangzi's answer is not because he is charming, and it is not because he has power. In fact, it is almost the opposite. His appeal comes from something deeper. His heart is not constantly reaching outward. He does not depend on other people's eyes to prove who he is. He does not fall apart simply because he does not fit society's standards. He is inwardly whole, and because of that, when others come near him, they sense a rare kind of steadiness. This is what inner fullness means in this chapter. Here, the word virtue should not be understood simply as a moral judgment, like saying this person is kind or this person is noble. In Zhuangzi, day or virtue is closer to an inner vitality, a kind of wholeness that cannot be shattered by outside standards. So, virtue complete means that this inner vitality is full and intact. A person may not have a perfect appearance. Their status may not be impressive. Their life circumstances may not fit society's standards. But if they are inwardly settled and whole, then they are not a broken person. This speaks very strongly to us today. Modern society is strange. On the one hand, it keeps talking about diversity, inclusion, and being yourself. On the other hand, it keeps producing new standards. What kind of face counts as beautiful? What kind of body counts as healthy? What kind of job counts as respectable? Even a person's emotional state is expected to be positive, stable, and free of visible trouble. So many people live in what seems to be a freer age, yet they find it even easier to doubt themselves. We may not literally be locked up by anyone, but inside there is often a measuring ruler. Every day it measures us. Am I not good enough? Am I falling behind? Is something wrong with me? Zhuangzi does not look at people this way. He might ask, why are you so quick to believe that you are incomplete? Maybe you are not inadequate. Maybe you simply do not fully match the beauty standards of this age. Maybe you have not truly failed. Maybe you just have not lived according to the schedule someone else set for you. A person's value is not always something that can be immediately recognized by a system obsessed with efficiency, ranking, and results. This is what makes the sign of virtue complete so moving. It does not pretend that external pain does not exist, nor does it offer the shallow comfort of saying, as long as you are strong inside, nothing else matters. Physical limitations, social position, and other people's judgment can all bring real pressure. Zhuangzi does not deny this, but he wants to pull us out of a deeper kind of trap. Do not believe too quickly in the definitions the outside world gives you. Do not reduce a human life to appearance, function, identity, and social evaluation. In the sign of virtue complete, Zhuangzi is really giving the word wholeness a new place to stand. A deeper kind of wholeness means that even after passing through the judgments of the outside world, a person has still not handed themselves over completely. What is truly precious in a person is not how perfect they appear, but whether they can still keep their spiritual center in the face of all kinds of standards. But Zhuangzi's questions do not stop here, because human beings do not only face other people's judgments, we also face something much larger: change, aging, loss, and death. If the sign of virtue complete asks how a person can remain whole within imperfection, then the next chapter, the great and venerable teacher, asks this: when life itself is constantly changing and even moving step by step toward death, can a person still keep their heart at peace? This is the question that the great and venerable teacher leads us into. The deepest part of Zhuangzi is not only that it talks about freedom, it also talks about death. The chapter the great and venerable teacher appears on the surface to ask, who is the true master worth learning from? Zhuangzi's answer is not a certain authority figure, nor is it a fixed system of theory. His answer is the Tao itself. Here we can first understand the Tao as the way life itself unfolds. It tells us one of the most basic and also one of the hardest truths to accept. Everything changes, and human beings change too. Life is not something we can hold on to forever. It is a constantly flowing process. In this chapter, there is a very unusual story. A man is seriously ill, and his body has already changed greatly. His friends come to visit him, assuming that he must be in pain and fear. But he does not complain about fate, and he does not ask, why me? He says, if creation turns my left arm into a rooster, then I will let it announce the dawn. If it turns my right arm into a crossbow, then I will use it to shoot birds. If it turns my body into a wheel and my spirit into a horse, then I will follow along with the transformation. This sounds absurd, but Zhuangzi is not saying that a person will literally turn into a rooster, a crossbow, or a wheel. He is using an exaggerated image to talk about the attitude a person may have when facing illness, aging, and changes in the body. Our most instinctive reaction is often resistance. Why has my body become like this? Why can't I return to the way I was before? Why has life not gone in the direction I wanted? Zhuangzi is not saying that this pain does not exist. What he wants to ask is this: when change has already happened, when life no longer unfolds according to our plans, do we have to be left with only resentment and fear? Or can we, within change itself, find a new way to go on living? At this point, the idea becomes easier to understand. We all hope our bodies will always stay healthy. We hope to remain young. We hope our relationships will remain stable forever. We hope life will move forward according to plan, but life does not always cooperate with our wishes. Zhuangzi is not saying that these changes are not painful, nor is he saying that people should not grieve. He is reminding us, change is not an accident in life. Change is life itself. If we only want to freeze everything in place, we end up fighting against the way the whole world moves. There is another, even more famous story in the great and venerable teacher, the story of Zhuangzi's wife passing away. After Zhuangzi's wife died, his friend Huzi came to offer his condolences. He expected to see Zhuangzi weeping in grief, but when he entered the room, he found Zhuangzi sitting on the ground, beating on a basin and singing. Huzi was shocked. He reproached him and said, "She lived with you for so many years. She took care of the household for you and accompanied you through life. Now that she has passed away, even if you do not cry, how can you be singing?" Zhuangzi did not say that he felt no sadness. He said, "When she first died, how could I not be sad?" But then he thought about it. In the beginning, she had no life, no form, and no breath. Later, through the transformations of heaven and earth, she came to have breath, form, and life. Now she has returned once again into the greater transformation of things. It is just like the seasons moving from spring to summer, autumn and winter. She has quietly returned to the world of heaven and earth. If I were to keep crying and wailing, it would mean that I do not understand the transformations of life. To many people, this may sound cold, but Zhuangzi is not someone without feeling. He is not saying do not grieve, nor is he saying death does not matter. What he is saying is this: grief is real, but death can also be understood within a larger cycle of life. When we lose a person, a relationship, our health, our youth, or even a former version of ourselves, of course we suffer. Zhuangzi would not deny that pain, but he would ask, beyond the pain, can we also see that life has never been still? Gaining is a kind of change. Losing is also a kind of change. Meeting someone is change. Parting from someone is change. There is another important idea in the great and venerable teacher: sitting in forgetfulness. The phrase may sound mysterious, but we can put it simply. Sitting in forgetfulness means allowing that overly tense, overly calculating, overly self proving I to quiet down for a while. In this story, Yan Hui tells Confucius that he has reached a new understanding. At first, he says he has let go of external rules and rituals. Later, he says that even his attachment to ideas like, I must become a good person or I must live up to a certain moral standard, has slowly fallen away. Finally, he says that he has entered the state of sitting in forgetfulness. Here, forgetting does not mean losing memory. It does not mean becoming confused. It means no longer being held so tightly by fixed identities, standards, and judgments. You are no longer constantly asking yourself, am I performing well enough? Am I right? Am I being recognized? Am I worse than other people? When these voices become quiet, a person may finally begin to hear the rhythm of life itself. For us today, we do not have to understand sitting in forgetfulness as some mysterious spiritual practice. It is more like an inner loosening. We rarely truly stop. Even when the body is sitting still, the mind is often still calculating. Is this good for me? Did I say something wrong just now? Will other people look down on me? Am I falling behind again? When we gain something, we immediately worry about losing it. When we lose something, we rush to prove that we have not lost completely. We think we are living, but much of the time we are actually keeping accounts. That is why people become so tired. Not necessarily because they have done so many things in a day, but because the mind has never really settled. The body may be still, but the heart feels as if it is being chased by something, refusing to stop even for a moment. So, sitting in forgetfulness means temporarily setting down the small self that is always comparing, judging, worrying, and trying to prove itself. If the sign of virtue complete helps us recover our wholeness from external standards, then the great and venerable teacher helps us recover peace from our fear of change. It tells us we cannot stop all change and we cannot hold on to everything in life forever. But we can learn not to treat every change as destruction and not to treat every loss as the end of life itself. And yet, human beings have an even stronger desire: the desire to control. We want to control ourselves, control other people, control relationships, and even control how life is supposed to unfold. So, in the final chapter of the Inner Chapters of Zhuangzi, responding to emperors and kings, Zhuangzi uses a very short and striking story to reveal the danger of control. The most famous story in this chapter is called The Death of Hun Dun. In the story, there are three mythical beings. The spirit of the southern sea is called Shu, the spirit of the northern sea is called Hu, and the spirit of the center is called Hun Dun. Hun Dun is not an ordinary person. He is more like a form of life that has not yet been divided, organized, or forced into any fixed shape. Shu and Hu often visit Hun Dun, and Hun Dun treats them very well. He always receives them warmly. Shu and Hu feel grateful, so they think, we should repay Hun Dun somehow. They notice that human beings all have eyes, ears, nostrils, and a mouth, but Hun Dun has none of these openings. So they begin to wonder, is Hun Dun incomplete like this? Maybe we should help him become more like a normal living being. So every day they open one hole in Hun Dun, one each day. By the seventh day, The openings for eyes, ears, mouth, and nose have all been made, but Hundun dies. The story is very short, but deeply sad, because Hundun is not harmed by enemies. He is killed by friends who are trying to improve him out of kindness. Shu and Hu do not have bad intentions. They genuinely want to help Hundun. The problem is that they mistake the form they are familiar with for the form that all life should have. They believe that becoming like us means becoming better. But Zhuangzi reminds us, sometimes the wholeness of a life lies precisely in the fact that it has not been forcibly remade into something else. This story is actually very easy to understand because our society also loves to optimize everything. Time can be optimized, the body can be optimized, emotions can be managed, sleep can be tracked, relationships can be analyzed. In the end, wherever efficiency is lacking, we adjust it. Wherever performance is not good enough, we upgrade it. Of course, Zhuangzi is not against becoming better. Learning, improving, and self discipline are not bad in themselves. The problem is that when everything becomes a matter of control, life begins to lose its own breathing space. Parents say it is all for the child's own good, so they arrange every step of the child's path. Companies say it is for the sake of efficiency, so they break people down into parts that can be managed, measured, and replaced. Society calls this success and quietly pushes everyone to run in the same direction. All of this may sound reasonable, but over time, a person can slowly forget, where is my own rhythm? What kind of life do I actually want? What is even more hidden is that we often treat ourselves this way too. In the name of self discipline, self improvement, and becoming better, we keep reshaping ourselves bit by bit. Our emotions should be stable, our bodies should be managed, our efficiency should improve, and our future, ideally, should never go out of control. But a human being is not a machine. If, after all this improving, we can no longer hear the real voice inside us, then that kind of becoming better is also dangerous. What Zhuangzi worries about is exactly this kind of excessive reshaping hidden behind good intentions. You think you are making life more complete, but you may actually be slowly killing its original form. That is why the death of Hundun still has power today. It shows us that life is not a machine that can be optimized without limit, and a human being is not a project that always needs to be repaired. Sometimes, what we truly need is not one more plan, one more standard, or one more round of self reconstruction, but a little more space for life to grow naturally. Responding to emperors and kings tells us that the highest form of governing is not to control everything, but to allow things to grow according to their own nature. True wisdom is not turning everything into a shape we already recognize. It is admitting that different forms of life have different ways of being whole. By this point, we have walked through the core path of the 7 inner chapters of Zhuangzi. These 7 chapters are not 7 isolated stories. They are more like a path that slowly helps us loosen our grip on ourselves. From the kun and the peng, we see that a person cannot remain forever trapped in their original waters. True freedom begins with enlarging the scale through which we understand life. From the butterfly dream, we see that the self we think is fixed and unchanging may also be in transformation. You are not only your job, your past, your labels, or the version of you that exists in other people's eyes. From Kukding, we see that mature action is not about forcing our way through. It is about moving with the grain of things, getting things done without exhausting ourselves. From the fasting of the mind, we see that before entering the complicated world of human affairs, we must first settle our own hearts. Not every argument is worth joining, and not every person can be changed by us. From the sign of virtue complete, we see that a person's wholeness does not lie in appearance, status, or social ranking. You do not have to meet every standard in order to have value. From the great and venerable teacher, we see that change, loss, and death are not exceptions to life. They are part of life itself. True peace does not come from holding on to everything, but from learning not to be shattered by change. And finally, with the death of Hun Dun, we see that excessive control can also become a kind of harm. Sometimes, true wisdom is not to reshape life into the form we want, but to give it enough space to grow in its own way. After reading the 7 inner chapters, we may feel that Zhuangzi has been gently loosening us all along. At first, he asks us to widen our vision so that we no longer live only inside the small gains and losses right in front of us. Then he asks us to let go of the labels we hold too tightly and not rush to define ourselves or others by a single standard. Later, he talks about how to act, how to protect ourselves in the human world, how to face change, aging, and death. And in the end, he reminds us not to mistake control for freedom. But Zhuangzi does not stop here. The outer chapters and miscellaneous chapters carry these questions into a wider world. A person does not only face themselves in solitude, they also have to face knowledge, education, reputation, institutions, nature, and the clashes between different ways of thinking. If the inner chapters ask, how can a person avoid being trapped by themselves? Then the outer and miscellaneous chapters continue the question, when this person walks into the crowd, into their age, and into a more complicated world, can they still keep a little clarity, a little ease, and a little freedom that truly belongs to them? And here, the 7 inner chapters of Zhuangzi come to a temporary close. If you are interested, in future episodes we can continue into the outer chapters and the miscellaneous chapters and see how Zhuangzi's wisdom moves from the inner life of a person into the wider world of human society. Thank you for watching. If this video has given you a new understanding of Zhuangzi, or perhaps of your own life, feel free to like, subscribe, or share it with someone who may need it too. See you next time.